Funding for Idaho Reports is provided by the Friends of 4, 10, and 12, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by a grant from the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation.
High-tech industry. Some have called it Idaho's best-kept economic secret. Others see it as the economic salvation of this state. Is it? We'll look at that tonight.
Good evening. President Reagan had some lavish praise today for the Space Shuttle program, saying the high-tech advancements of the U.S. space program have provided benefits far more valuable than the original investment this country made in space exploration. The president also said today that there will continue to be high-tech advances in the United States as long as the proper economic climate is maintained. Mr. Reagan saying what we need is high-tech, not high taxes. The president's optimism about the high-tech economic future is no doubt shared by many people in Idaho. Governor John Evans, for example, has repeatedly talked about the need to attract high-tech businesses to this state. And many economists believe the state's long-term economic health depends in no small part on a growing high-tech industry replacing a shrinking natural resource-based economy. Well, all of this faith in high-tech, is it well placed? Can Idaho get its share or even more than its share of the new businesses that are producing the new technology? That's our focus tonight, beginning with producer Bruce Reichert.
It's what every small town wants, a good clean industry that waltzes right in and provides hundreds of jobs for the townfolk. Needless to say, it doesn't happen very often, but when it does, everyone wants to take a bow, from the governor on down to the town mayor. By all accounts, Glens Ferry was on its last leg. The railroad had pulled out, a couple large potato farms had closed, and the young people were looking elsewhere for employment. But then something happened. Two brothers, Jerry and Larry Heath, and their wives, Janice and Shirley, came back home. In what the governor's men are calling a storybook example of economic development in Idaho, the two couples were congratulated for almost single-handedly revitalizing the sleepy farming community.
We've had a hard time in Glens Ferry. A lot of the graduates from high school would like to stay, but there were no jobs. So they were forced to leave, and it was turning into a retirement town. Well, now with more jobs for the young people that want to stay, it's at least an opportunity. If they want to, they can stay here and go to work.
Earlier this month, the Heaths procured a $490,000 loan through the Small Business Administration, apparently the first such 25-year loan in Idaho. With that loan, they hope to expand their operations from 70 to 280 workers. But as the governor pointed out, getting that loan was not easy.
Between the groups of federal agencies, state agencies, local agencies, and private business financial institutions, we were able to secure the necessary loan through the 503 SBA funding program to fund this particular new addition to the Heath program here in Glens Ferry.
The Heaths had grown up around Glens Ferry, and therefore they knew the people, and they knew the benefits of a small town.
The quality of people that you find in the rural areas they're good, hard-working people, and I think we'll be able to find all of the. We'll just do that. We can hire people and then train them, so we'll be able to find most everybody we need. Some engineers and things we have to entice out of Seattle.
I find we've got people that are very willing to work. And then they're so tickled and happy to be able to learn a trade, something that is really a skill. And they go through a training course. We do some testing. There are a few that just cannot handle it, but most of them really take to it, like it. They enjoy the challenge of learning a profession.
As you can see, we mostly work ladies. We have found that it's hard for men to sit and do the work they do. Well, they sew, they do everything, and this just fits right in with that. They have the patience that I don't have. So I think that's where we get a lot of our help. And we have about, what, 100 names in Glens Ferry on a call list. So we have at least that many people we know we can get right away.
No doubt about it, the Heaths have pumped new life into their favorite community. But what about the hundreds of other small communities in Idaho, the ones who have suffered through the recession and who are hoping for a piece of the high-tech action? Just how realistic is it to assume that these communities can duplicate the good fortune of Glenn's Ferry? And is there a magic formula?
First, you have to leave. You have to learn the business and bring it back, because it's hard to entice someone off of the coast to gamble. We're not unique, but we've done something that everybody wants to do, and I think that is the unique part. But that would have to be, first you have to get acquainted with the industry, I think, before you can bring it in, and acquainted with a lot of people. That's what really helped us. We had 4 of us in an industry, and we learned lots of names, and the person has to have the desire to go home.
It's a clean industry. It's a nice industry to have in the state. You know, it's non-polluting. It's just, and it employs a lot of people. I think it's a very good industry to try to bring to Idaho.
That kind of enthusiasm about Idaho's high-tech future can obviously be contagious, but there is a downside. Producer Ann Summerall reports now on 2 companies that were established in northern Idaho, but have since picked up and left.
High-tech companies are opening production plants in many areas of North Idaho.
We're a very attractive area, socially, economically, environmentally. It's just a great place to live and work.
What we have to emphasize is the fact that we do have a labor force that is available, a labor force that works under good ethics.
Ironically, 2 companies have closed their doors and relocated in areas outside of Idaho. General Instrument, an international high-tech corporation headquartered in New York, won't allow its management people at this Post Falls facility to do a videotape interview for Idaho Reports, telling us why, after 9 years, they're leaving North Idaho. In a phone conversation with the Director of Personnel and the Marketing Manager, I found out that approximately 350 people will be laid off due to a decision to not automate this labor-intensive facility. They are consolidating all keyboard operations into the computer products facility at Juarez, Mexico. An employee there will be paid approximately 90 cents per hour, including benefits, as opposed to the $7 per hour price tag attached to a North Idaho production worker. Layoffs began May 11th and will continue through September 28th. Management did not express any problems with the area. They were simply executing the demands of the corporate office. Itron moved June 4th from this Post Falls facility while maintaining its Idaho workforce. Their new home in the Spokane Valley Industrial Park is just several miles across the Idaho state line. Here they manufacture electronic meter reading systems for various utility companies. Most of Itron's employees lived in Spokane, Washington, the rest in North Idaho. An equidistant location was only one of the reasons for their move.
The difference is just numbers. People are just as smart in Idaho as they are in Spokane. God didn't unevenly distribute intellect. It's pretty evenly distributed. It's just that there's more people to draw from in Spokane than there is in Idaho. And the people that live in Idaho pay a state income tax, and they get all of the services that prevail when you pay a tax. But along with that, the people from Spokane also paid that income tax and got none of the services.
Members of the Chamber of Commerce and county officials made a presentation to Itron's management team, but could not offer enough to keep them here.
One of the things that could have been done to keep us in Idaho was some kind of incentive. There are some incentives with regard to some loans and things like that, but nothing that was very applicable for us.
The commissioner agrees that there is a problem with tax incentives.
There really are no tax incentives at all. The state of Idaho Constitution and statutes prevent things like tax abatement. We just cannot do that. There are some financial programs that we can offer, industrial revenue bonds. We locally have revolving loan funds of several hundreds of thousands of dollars available at low interest costs to industries to purchase equipment, build buildings, buy property, in some cases even use as working capital. So we have financial incentives, but we cannot give tax incentives.
High technology's growth potential in the Northwest United States could be limited.
If you take a look at where high technology growth has taken place, it started in the Boston area with MIT and the educational facilities that were available there. It went to California in the Bay Area, where we have Stanford and Cal and University of Santa Clara and San Jose State, all in a cluster. They're turning out all of these people with the professors that are there that are doing research in these areas and such. And I don't see that certainly in the Northwest area. I think you'll see pockets of it, but for sustained growth and for this to really be a big thing in this area, I don't think we'll have it unless we have the concentration of educational facilities.
The future of high tech for Idaho may be unknown, but Post Falls residents are confident they will survive with or without it.
There seems to be a big interest in our commercial development now that our new sewer system is almost online. September 4th, we hope to open our plant. We've been the largest unsewered city in the state of Idaho. And with the new sewer plant, there's 3 or 4 new big developments that we're really excited about. Things are in Post Falls, we think, are really looking good.
Because our biggest opportunity is in our own backyard, is to help those mills and help those mining companies and to help the high-tech industries that are already here to expand, to help them train their workforce, to help them financially when we can. It is frankly so competitive to recruit a company from some other area to come in. We're not prepared to do that, and it's expensive, but we can be very efficient in helping our own hometown industries, and it's really our biggest opportunity for job creation.
We continue our look now at Idaho's high-tech future with 3 guests. The first of them, John Overby, the founder, president, and chief executive officer of Advanced Input Devices, a Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls company that produces, among other things, electronic keyboards. Mr. Overby, thanks for being with us tonight. You wrote recently in the publication called Idaho's Economy that eventually this high-tech industry would be second only to agriculture in Idaho in the number of people it employs. What makes you believe that?
Mark, I think it's the trend that we've seen in the few years that electronics have been in Idaho already. Last year we saw employment in the electronics industry in Idaho grow between 16 and 20% last year. We're now at about 7,000 people in the electronics industry statewide. 10 years ago there were probably 300. And if you look at the nature of the firms that are in the state, they're all growing rapidly, and if you study the industry a lot, you'll find that high-tech industries, or specifically electronics, tend to be more recession-proof than most other industries. So there's a compounding thing going on here. So if the companies in the state are healthy now, I think they all look forward to heavy growth in the future, regardless of the economy.
So the bellwether of the future should be the firm like the one in Glens Ferry that we saw in the videotape, as opposed to a firm like one in northern Idaho that's moved out of the state.
Correct. I think to add to that a little, General Instrument is a competitor of ours. There's another competitor in Spokane, so we call that Keyboard Valley. The way they operate their business is different than either we or Keytronic. Both of our companies are growing rapidly, and theirs has been shrinking. So we're in the same industry with competitive products, yet we have different ways of approaching business.
Is this something, Mr. Overby, that is happening in every state, or is Idaho in a different position than a lot of other states?
I think it's happening not in every state, but in many states, I think, at varying levels. There's some contra trends, though, in California and places. The cost of living, the cost of just being there and running a business is getting exorbitant, and you're finding the California companies looking to places like Spokane, Boise, Colorado Springs to put their factories. And so the more wayward states, I guess, or places out of the way, are benefiting from that reindustrialization, I believe.
So in a way it helps us being out of the mainstream.
Exactly.
We'll come back, sir. Thank you. Our second view of this tonight comes from Michael Ferguson, the chief economist of the State Division of Financial Management, the budget office of the executive branch of state government. Is Mr. Overby overly optimistic, Mr. Ferguson?
Well, I think there may be a bit of over-optimism. My assessment of the opportunities that Idaho has with respect to high tech is basically good. I think it's a very sound area of growth in Idaho's economy. However, I think there are some dangers in the horizon. Mr. Overby pointed out that high-tech industries typically are recession-proof. I think that may be a characteristic of the stage of the life cycle of the industry that is currently that we're in, that tends to lead to that result. He pointed out in his article, I believe, that they have reductions in their growth rate during recessions in the national economy. That could change in the future. The Japanese are, I think, moving more heavily into direct competition with U.S. producers. They've not been innovators, they're more followers. U.S. producers will develop technology, the Japanese will then improve on it and compete very strongly in the markets that are initially developed by American producers.
Well, excuse me, go ahead. How about his point about the being bigger than, as big as second only to agriculture in terms of the overall importance to the state's economy? Is that realistic?
I think part of that would depend on how you define high technology industries. There are a number of different definitions that are floating around. One definition includes SIC category 28, which is chemicals, and in Idaho I think that's a very resource-based activity, phosphate mining in southeastern Idaho, yet that's regarded high-tech. Another aspect of high-tech in some of the common definitions include business services. That's currently a very large portion of Idaho's economy. If you're looking at electronics per se, I tend to think that in the immediate future, the foreseeable future, it's unlikely that the electronics industry will overshadow the natural resources industries. The one I'm thinking of in particular, forest industries, besides the manufacturing component, which currently employs approximately 15,000 in the state, there are a number of tertiary activities that are related to the service and provision of the equipment necessary to conduct the manufacturing activity. There's activity in the forests that don't reflect in the actual employment data under manufacturing. So I think it has a broader impact, a higher multiplier, if you will, effect on the economy. So some of the figures need to be interpreted carefully.
So just in a word, it's a mixed bag.
Yes.
Okay, we'll come back, sir. Thank you. Our final view tonight comes from another economist. Michael Donato is an economist on the faculty of the University of Idaho in Moscow, where he joins us tonight. Is high-tech the kind of industry we want in Idaho? Mr. Donato?
In terms of jobs, one can take and talk about the distribution. High-tech brings in a lot of professional technicals, managerials, and basically a lot of those senior positions are filled by people from out of state. The majority of the jobs for the people in the state tend to come out of the other end of the skill range. And generally speaking, the wages that go along with that other end of the skill range are reasonably low. So if you want to talk about overall income availability, high-tech presents some problems as well as some benefits.
I've seen it, for example, described as a minimum wage industry plus $1.
Some people like to say that. Basically, within the video there that you had at the beginning of the program, they talked about supplying jobs mainly to women without getting into any kind of women's lib kind of a thing. One can note that they do structure jobs towards more of a secondary worker under the old classification. One divided up the household into the primary source of income and the secondary source of income, and the secondary workers were the female workers generally and the older children. They were not as wage responsive, to put it bluntly. The primary worker, if you're going to depend upon an income source, these people are going to be very wage responsive. So if you can move into an area and take advantage of people who aren't really wage conscious, then you're going to pay them low wages.
So just in a word, these companies need obviously some skilled scientific people, and they're going to attract those people, but they'll generally be people who are going to come out of the state and you're creating new jobs obviously, but not for people who are currently in Idaho. And then there's a second level of job created for that aren't very high paying.
That's basically the problem.
Yeah. Let me ask you just finally, and then we'll open this up. In terms of the broadest possible spectrum here, how big an industry can this be in Idaho compared to agriculture or mining or forestry?
Well, as long as you have current national economic conditions, national debt, problems in restructuring the automobile industry, the mineral and the forest products industries are going to be depressed. That, in effect, almost by default, will increase the importance of the high tech. In terms of absolute size instead of relative size, high-tech, I'm not sure how big they're going to become. High-tech hides their pollution. You need a large sewer system to take care of your acids and heavy metals that are byproducts of the process. And the question is, do we have that kind of social overhead capital to accommodate a large high-tech industry? You also have to look...
What's your answer to that? Do we?
I don't think so. I saw an estimate last year or the year before down in the Boise area that Hewlett-Packard had pretty well used up the sewer capacity of the area, that new firms could not move in because there just wasn't capacity.
Yeah, well, on that note, let me open it up, and I'll invite all of you to get back in this when you want. Mr. Overby, let me go back to you on that last point, that maybe we don't, if I'm hearing Mr. Donato correctly, maybe we don't have the physical infrastructure, is the word that the politicians use these days, to support this kind of industry. What's your view of that?
I think you'd have to look at each situation individually. I'm not aware of the HP situation there in Boise on that issue. I'm aware of one that we had. We require a sewer system, if for no other reason, because of the number of employees you have. You have a relatively large employment density in your buildings, and you don't want to be pumping that into septic tanks. And up where we come from, and over the aquifer, there are not a lot of sewer systems. So at one point in our growth, that was a major issue about where we would locate plant sites, and it's one of the reasons we went to Priest River, Idaho, because they annexed a new industrial park into the city and ran the sewer systems out there, so we would have proper facilities. So I think you have to take them all case by case.
Well, both of these gentlemen seem to take some exception to your optimism about how big an industry this can be.
I wouldn't disagree with their comments. Nobody knows how large it will be. The thing I'm positive of, the compound growth rate per year would be at least 10%, could get as high as 20. I think one of the benchmarks to look for, however, is this thing called critical mass. For many years, the Bay Area, Silicon Valley wasn't what it is today, but at some point, you get enough of this thing going on, enough talent in the area, whether they came from the outside or within, doesn't matter. But people start leaving companies and starting their own. We're an example of that. And I think once that starts happening, then the explosion really goes. Now, whether it'll ever achieve that mass or not, to get that, I don't know.
So a few companies will, in place and doing well, will serve as a magnet to draw other companies.
Exactly. It's happened already, and you know, we sell nationally and internationally. Our customers come to our factories before they ever order. IBM buys from us, all the big companies that you all read about, and they're impressed with the area. And you know, they'll someday have plants around here, sooner or later.
How about that, Mr. Donato?
There are, infrastructure problems, there's transportation problems, there's problems with respect to just land availability. Generally speaking, high-tech requires fairly large amounts of land. You have constraints operating. I will gladly concede that there are what economists call agglomeration economies. As you get things going, they will take off. Yes, competitors move in. I just believe that there are severe limiting factors in the physical environment.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Ferguson, how about Mr. Donato's point about the kinds of jobs that these industries create? Basically, he talked about secondary jobs. We're talking about maybe a lot of women in the workforce who aren't going to be paid that much.
Well, I agree with Mr. Donato. I think that in looking at this issue, one needs to consider the different character of the jobs that are being created. And I think the point that the higher paid professional and technical jobs are largely drawn from out of state is something that is reversible, but would require essentially some major commitment on the part of the state to providing a very solid education system from the primary and secondary on through the college level. I think they're, from a broader economic development standpoint, providing solid education is going to provide considerable benefit. In the high tech, I think that tends to be emphasized more than in other areas. I also agree that there are some hidden problems lurking. For example, the affluent problem. I think we're seeing some of those surfacing now in the Silicon Valley area. There are a number of articles appearing. There are a number of lawsuits that are going on there.
So when we talk about high tech as being a clean industry, that's not necessarily the case.
smokestacks are underground.
Right. Okay.
But I think they're manageable. I think those are things that can be dealt with. Right now, improvement in growth in high tech is good for the state. I think that could be carried to a fault. Right now, it's going to diversify the economy. There are risks, though. The level of offshore competition is, I think, the example of General Instruments moving out of the Coeur d'Alene area is an example of the kinds of dangers that can occur. It's a very fast-paced industry, very rapid technological developments. It's pretty easy for a fairly small firm to be left in the dust.
Yeah. Mr. Overby, how important is education and the education system of the state, both in terms of attracting these kinds of industries and keeping them here once they arrive?
I think it's critical. It's part of the thing that will determine the growth rate of the industry. You need a source of ideas for new products, new companies. And we talked earlier about Santa Clara and all the things that happen down there. We don't have that here, and we probably never will have that high-tech, in a true sense, research base to spin off all the ideas. But I don't think we need that. What we need in the state is proper funding of the University of Idaho engineering schools and other schools in the state, so the guys coming out, gals, can find jobs in Idaho and make sure that the quality of that education is what it used to be. I'm a University of Idaho graduate, and they've done a fine job with the money they have, but we sure make it tough for them to turn out the kinds of students we want every year with so little money. We need to do something about it.
Are these going to be well-paying jobs that these people are going to be in line to get?
I'm talking about professionals, you know, electrical engineers, software engineers, mechanicals, business graduates. I think it's worth commenting that a lot of companies who have corporate headquarters in Idaho tend to employ, they don't go outside for all their help, you know, a much less percent, whereas maybe somebody coming in from the outside, starting up and have to start out, maybe they bring more of the top management from the outside, but it doesn't have to be that way. So I think you need to separate Idaho-based companies from outside-based that are just running a remote operation here.
Just a final thought, Mr. Donato, how important is the tax structure in either attracting or keeping these industries?
Generally speaking, the high-tech are very, very responsive to the tax structures and the basic availability of financial capital, and it's extremely important. It ranks second or third as a locational factor, right behind something like quality of lifestyle. In surveys of these companies, they're continually looking at the kinds of taxes being paid, the kinds of loan programs available.
Mr. Overby, how does Idaho's tax structure stack up in that regard?
Right now, I'd say it's favorable. The part that worries me is every session of the legislature, we seem to waffle. We never know where we're going. As a businessman trying to plan our future, it's rather tough that way. And I think the only problem with the Idaho system now is its unpredictability. But in absolute terms, I would say it's very adequate.
Well, Mr. Overby and Mr. Donato in Moscow, we thank you for being with us tonight. Good to talk to you. Mr. Ferguson, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
That's our time for tonight. We'll be back tomorrow. I'm Mark Johnson. Good night.
Funding for Idaho Reports is provided by the Friends of 4, 10, and 12, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by a grant from the Laura Moore Cunningham Foundation.